I normally wouldn't do something like this, but this is this big of an announcement that I feel like I really need to. I'm just kidding. I make videos like this all the time. Let's take a look. Hi, friends. I'm a senior game designer on the systems team. I've been working on World of Warcraft, that's the video game, for 14 years now, and I worked through a few, probably more than one, PTR cycle like this one. In this post, I'd like to talk about some of what we're doing in the Eternity's End, and you'll see in updates coming to the PTR over the next couple weeks. This is a huge post. Like, I can't believe this is pretty cool. We want the return of class sets to be as satisfying as possible, so we're tweaking different aspects of how you'll acquire and fill out your class set based on your feedback. I don't know why they took so long to announce this, because this honestly is, I'm very excited about this. Okay, so first of all, from the start of the PTR, we intended to have set pieces drop from a separate loot table on each boss that drops them, so that you're guaranteed to see many set pieces over time. And this has been a big talking point over the last few weeks, if you haven't been following, but yeah, various pros and cons to this. Anyway, there's class sets. These class sets are a highlight of this content update. And we don't want a run of bad luck to cause a raid team to complete a full clear and realize they only got a very small number of set pieces. And what he's saying here is specifically set pieces, because this would have been a really big issue in the old days. And honestly, that was fine back then. Nobody seemed to care. But, you know, it's woke wow 2022. So we got to make sure everybody gets exactly what they want. And to be honest, I understand why you'd want to do that, because these set bonuses are like, it's a really big deal. This is a really big deal. So I'm totally fine with them doing this kind of thing. But anyway, the PTR is there for testing, and rather unfortunately, you all found a nasty bug that doubled the loot tables. So the whole thing where you were getting like, I think it was like 4 items and then another 4 set pieces, set bonus items, whatever, like the tier items as well. That was actually a bug. Okay, so once we fix that bug, again in the next couple of weeks, we should see the expected amount of total drops from each boss, still with those guaranteed set pieces in a smaller ratio to the bug table, just fewer total items. You should see the, so basically they're saying like, we haven't finalized how many items we want to drop, but it's obviously not going to be like 8 items per boss all of a sudden. And so like originally the problem there was like, you know, you have to balance that, right? Because if you get like 8 items and 4 of them are tier items, and nobody could trade them, and there's no reason to get them like 2 or 3 months in, then it's like, well, what the hell do we even do with this stuff? You know what I mean? And so it's kind of flawed from the start. That's why it probably shouldn't be separate loot. I mean, frankly, it's kind of a dumb idea. You're kind of putting yourself in a position where you're just going to be getting vendor trash over and over again. But it's not really, you know, it's fine. I think it's better to err on this side. And he explicitly says, please don't stop reading here, because basically he knows how stupid this community is. And he expects people to stop reading as soon as he said that they're nerfing the amount of loot you're going to get. And good thing I don't stop reading there, because there's a lot more to read. The creation catalyst. So we're finally learning about this. If you watch all of these videos I've been making on this stuff, I literally didn't even know. I never even heard of this. And now I've heard of it. So we've been designing this tier with the future eventuality in mind. If you haven't heard of it yet, a new in-game gear transformer called the Creation Catalyst will come online 8 weeks after the content update, if all goes according to plan. And so that's an incredibly important number. Remember that number. The Creation Catalyst will allow you to craft set gear that you haven't yet gotten from raid bosses or the Great Vault, and it will also be a swift way to gear up an alt later in the patch. The Catalyst exists as an answer to the problems we've had with class sets in the past, where either acquisition was much too fast and threw off content, or painfully slow and annoying. Your voices and frustration with those systems are the reason we're building the Catalyst today. It's powered by Cosmic Flux, which you'll find easy enough to gather for this purpose. That's a weird way to put it. Cosmic Flux can and should be taken to the Rune Carver. Can and should also be taken to the Rune Carver to make legendary gear. Now, this is probably the best part about this, so let's keep reading. The Creation Catalyst is going to have an internal cooldown, which is a global charge that accumulates. This isn't a case where it's a personal cooldown that you could miss and fall behind. Everyone's got the same number of charges at a given time, so you're all on a level playing field. This isn't an arbitrary decision. I'll have to say, like, the way they're actually communicating this is so much better than how they used to do this kind of stuff. Anyway, this isn't an arbitrary decision. By putting an accumulating charge on the catalyst, we avoid making it so that the right way to play is to focus on gathering flux and not use it for legendaries or worrying about grinding out as much as humanly possible, so that you can make your full set the moment the creation catalyst unlocks. You'll be able to make one piece at a time, of course, but then alts and players who come along later in the tier will find they can create multiple set pieces right away, which fulfills its role as a catch-up mechanism. We're also switching to tokens. We've seen a lot of feedback both from players on the PCR and our colleagues internally, making the case for set pieces dropping as tokens rather than discrete items. While both ways of doing it have pros and cons, we've decided to have bosses drop set slot tokens in Eternity's End. First, let's talk about the design side of things. When it comes to designs like this one, we think about all the different likely scenarios for the player experience. For example, how do set drops work out for a player who is the only mage in their raid group? Very good question. How do we see that going and feeling if that person is the only mage in 6 consecutive weeks of raiding? What about a scenario where the raid has 7 mages? We don't want it to be more difficult for any particular player in any particular situation to get set pieces from boss drops and trades, especially as you go later into the patch, and some players who have most of the sets are raiding with other players who, for various reasons, have none. In addition to the design considerations, there are also technical limitations. Wow, maybe you talk more about these, people wouldn't be down your throat so much. Items which are dropped as a token are very different from the perspective of the game code than items which are equipable by a player, and not quite as smart. As a result, some of the work we do to make sure loot was equitable and fair aren't always as effective with them, a lesson we drew from how Castle Nathria played out. So, interesting stuff. As a result, we'd have been sacrificing some important reliability features by using tokens. However, thanks to an heroic assist from our hard-working engineering team, those restrictions have been removed, and tokens are fully first-class citizens on the back end. Tokens aren't a magic bullet here, but we agree that with these changes, they'll hopefully feel better and distribute set gear as equitably, or more so, than discrete item drops would have. This is another experiment. We've done tokens in the past, but never with the full structure of parallel loot and the safeguard of the catalyst. It's a good point. But until we try tokens, we won't know how successful or not they are in that world. You should see the switch over to set tokens drops in the next week PTR update, and we'll be listening to your voices as 9.2 progresses. Thank you. We really appreciate all of the testing and feedback we've seen so far, and we're looking forward to your reaction to these coming changes. We want to hear everything you have to say about the tier ecosystem, obtaining tier, that is, their effects, many of which have changed already, trading, both of what you like and what you don't. It's immeasurably helpful to us. So let's talk a little bit about this creation catalyst, because I think this might honestly be this probably might be one of the biggest announcements they've ever made, and it might be one of the biggest features they've ever made, and probably it has the potential to be one of the most important things ever moving forward. So if you're not aware of how Cosmic Flux works, from what I can tell, it's almost identical to the currency you were getting at the end of Shadowlands. The end of BFA. I don't remember the name of it, but you were getting it from like everything. Okay. So I did a few Mythic Plus on the PTR. You do some world content, you get all this stuff. Okay. So now you can actually make catch-up gear with the currency. This is basically what people have been asking for years. Okay. And I think they're very cautious to move into it. 8 weeks, we talked about that. It's a little bit, that's a long time, right? 8 weeks from now is a long time. Well, not now, but 8 weeks from the patch drop is a long time. I assume it has something to do with the campaign. We were talking about how many weeks things were going to take prior, okay, before everything seemed like about 5 weeks. So it does seem like they have very set goals for when and where they're going to implement and effectively nerf the content that's out. And 8 weeks in is it's kind of long in my opinion, but it's, I mean, from what I could tell, it seems like it's 8 weeks for a single item. And then after that, you'll start be able to making one item. And I'm just going to read this again, because honestly, this is so interesting. We've been designing this tier with a future eventuality in mind. And what he's talking about is we know that for some reason, all of a sudden, after 17 years of this game, people are really frustrated with not getting loot, even though you basically removed all the systems that could have helped you with that by complaining about them, you're still mad about it somehow. And we don't really have a good solution to it because that's just how luck works. Sometimes you get unlucky, but you don't really like luck, even though your whole life is luck. So let's try to find a creative solution to it. Here it is. The creation catalyst will come online 8 weeks after the content update. And that's a very conservative number, obviously, because they don't want you doing that while like the main mode of progression is ongoing. You should at least have some bad luck to be offset first, right? Like it's not supposed to be the main way you obtain the gear, but it means that no matter what, if you still somehow don't have the gear and you've been unlucky after 8 weeks, there is a solution in sight, which is just, it's actually really generous. It's very nice. And I'm excited to see what this thing even looks like. Anyway, the creation catalyst will allow you to craft set gear that you haven't gotten from raid bosses or Great Vault. And I don't know if that means only that. I assume that doesn't mean only that. It means you could craft stuff that you want, preferably, but I don't know exactly, and we'll see more, right? Anyway, it will also be a swift way to gear up an alt later in the patch. And that's probably the coolest part because they're basically saying like, okay, people have been asking for this account-wide shit, and this is basically what this is. It means that even if you don't play your character, which, when I was growing up with this game, an alt had to actually do raid. Like there was nothing else. There was no world content. There was no Mythic Plus. There was no, in order to get good gear on alts, you had to actually do the content that your main had to do to get the gear. But now they're basically like, hey, yeah, we'll just give you everything. And so literally you don't even have to play the character. You can not even have the character online for 8 weeks and then log on and start getting tier. I mean, provided you get the creation catalyst currency, which is called Cosmic Flux. Okay. But anyway, it's really, I have to say, I think this is a really good compromise. The catalyst exists as an answer to the problems we've had with class sets in the past. Your voices and frustrations with those systems, and the reasons we're building the catalyst today. It's powered by Cosmic Flux, which you'll find easily enough to gather for this purpose. And what he means by that is basically it's everywhere. You can literally get it from every activity in the game. You'll probably get a ton from raiding too. And it's fucking genius. This is actually genius, and I think this is, they probably could have did this the whole time. But what I would like to see is a step further. I would like to see this taken one step further, where you can craft any item you want. And I think that, maybe sounds aggressive out of the gate, but as long as you don't allow people to do it immediately, I like this 8-week thing. We'll see what this number feels like after it's been there for a while. Maybe it will ultimately be too long, but I don't really care because my main complaint right now on my DK is that I've been trying to get some trinkets or maybe even specific items. Like I still don't actually have 3 pieces of gear to put the blood gear in on my new Knife A DK or my Night Elf DK. So it's like, let's find a way to solve that. I think it's fine. I think it's fine. This late in the season, I don't think it's an issue, right? Obviously, it's not. So like the reason that you can't do this from week 1 is because then people will be like, and I think this is even said, right? Creation Catalyst is going to have an internal cooldown, global charge that accumulates. This isn't a case where it's personal cooldown. You miss and fall behind. So that's basically saying like, hey, just in case you're too dumb to realize that you missed one, we're going to take that out for you. You don't have to worry about it. It's just no matter what, you can't possibly fall behind. Everyone's got the same number of charges at a given time, so you're all on a level playing field, which I'm actually not really a big fan of that from like a gameplay standpoint, but it's a really good thing for like the lowest common denominator having to mix with people who actually care about actively progressing their character. So that's fine. This isn't an arbitrary decision. I'm really glad to hear you say that out loud because there's so many people who think that people like the game is being developed by people who don't even understand what they're making. Anyway, by putting an accumulating charge on the catalyst, we're going to avoid it making so that the right way to play is to focus on gathering flux. And it's almost like maybe they learned a little bit of that from what happened with Classic here in the Season of Mastery. Because honestly, yeah, if that was the case, then it'd probably be more fruitful to just farm 5-mans and get the gear that way. And then you wouldn't even have to worry about it in raid. And that's definitely not good. Anyway, and not use it for legendaries or worry about grinding out as much as humanly possible. Which that part doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. Because it really makes me worry that there isn't actually going to be any purpose to having Cosmic Flux once you have all your gear. And that kind of worries me. Like, I mean, if you just gear up the normal way, what's the purpose of the currency? So hopefully there's something else on top of that. But anyway, so that you can make the full set the moment And so this part is confusing me. I'm just gonna not read this part because I always sucked at this. So we're gonna say we avoid making it the right way to play is to focus on gathering flux so that you can make the full set the moment the creation catalyst unlocks. Okay, so what they're saying is like we don't want that to happen. And that's actually a weird thing to say when you're taking 8 weeks. Because obviously, if you're that dedicated to gearing up, you would have multiple items in 8 weeks. Like you're not going to have no items in 8 weeks, right? Let's get serious. They're using these examples of a single mage. I mean, come on. Like there might be a couple people in the world who get that unlucky, but if you actually raid and kill, as many bosses as you can every week, and you do Mythic Plus a lot and stuff, you're not going to have 0 items after 8 weeks. Nobody gets that unlucky. But anyway, I mean, it's possible, of course. Yeah. So you'll be able to make one piece at that time, of course. But then alts and players who come along later in the tier will find that they can create multiple set pieces right away. So my question is like, how many pieces can we make after what period of time? Is it one a week? Is there some activity to increase the amount? Or is it just once a week? It probably just once a week. So it's a really, really, really good idea. I don't really care what happens because it's just a genius idea. And it's really, I'm really excited to see what the future holds with this type of system because, frankly, like the idea that they had with Mythic Plus, where you can actually, like in BFA, it was really good. Mythic Plus and BFA was really good, especially at the end, because you can grind out whatever that currency was and use that to buy the essences or use that to buy legendaries or whatever it was. I honestly can't even remember, but I just remember doing it and liking it, especially on alts. And it was causing a lot of people to do keys that didn't normally do keys and do keys like low keys and help other people out and stuff. It was good, a really good overall for the health of the lower keys. Like you obviously don't want people doing like 20s and stuff if they are only interested in gear, but doing 15s, great. So it's gonna be great for alts. I'm really excited about. Honestly, classes are the best they've ever been, if you ask me, in Shadowlands, and it's kind of weird that I just can't seem to get myself in gear to play alts. And I don't know if this is gonna help. It might not be the game. It just might be me. But it sounds like it would. Like one of the coolest things about 9.2 is the set bonuses. And I'm thinking like, yo, man, I'd love to play Resto Shaman, love to play Paladin specs, maybe even some DPS specs, Warlock. Man, I was really batting around Warlock and Hunter a lot in my head, but I'll probably never do it. I wanted to play some Warrior, Prot Warrior. And it's just like, yeah, you know what, man? Like, in order to, because like, think about where my Death Knight is, right? Like, gearing that character up has really taken about 6 weeks, and I'm still not anywhere close to be where I want to be on it. And so like that was 6 weeks of at least 2 to 4 sessions of gameplay in live, like while I'm live streaming, and then more even on top of that. So gearing does take a really long time, and I think this is a really cool solution. I really like this, and I really can't wait to see what 10.0 has. Like they keep adding awesome features to 9.2. It's just awesome stuff in general. So I'm really excited about this. I don't really care about the whole token thing. I guess we'll see how that plays out. I assume it's only going to be the raid is going to drop the tokens. Obviously from your vault, it doesn't matter one way or the other. Those can't be traded. I guess I want to learn a little bit more about Mythic Plus and how you get from there. It seems like maybe only the vault. But anyway, this is awesome. Really one of the coolest things I've ever seen them make.